If you are new to this series, we have been going through every single national title claim in college football history for the FBS or highest level at the time it was claimed. At this time, we have covered all the teams that have claimed 5 titles or less and are moving on to the higher numbers. Please go back and watch those for me after this if you enjoy this sort of thing. Prior to the college football playoffs and BCS national title game, we relied only on the polls to determine the college football national champion, with some formulas and short-lived systems in between attempting to better things. The polling system failed many times, with as many as 4 to 6 teams in contention that never even played each other. This often resulted in many split national championship years. Prior to 1965, some polls voted on their national champions before the bowl games were even played, and then saw their champion lose their final game. If you go back a little further, the first attempt to straighten things out came in 1936 with the creation of the AP poll, and was often the most respected poll for many years. But even then, the early media had their biases and favorites due to what they were familiar with. If all the writers and voters only saw Notre Dame or Yale, they would have no way to compare it to what was going on down south or out west, and usually just sided with what they knew. Prior to the AP, we had a wild, lawless 67 years of college football where many or no teams called themselves national champions, and a lot of those teams didn't even claim national titles in this era until more modern polls went back and retroactively named them national champions. While the AP poll is often the benchmark for a champion from 1936 to 1998, I would still argue that point. If the AP named you champion and nobody else did, that smells a bit fishy. Personally, I tend to side with what a majority of the polls say. So if the AP says you are the champ, but 11 others don't, I look deeper into the situation. And that's just me. You are free to do or think whatever you like.
Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
And of course, I view any titles won through the playoffs or BCS title game as automatically 100% legit from the start of the video, even if you disagree with the selection committee. And yes, I have also disagreed with them plenty of times. On the flip side, any that claim a separate title outside of those official parameters I view as complete bullshit, whether the selection committee screwed said team or not. History is history, and I respect that fact, even if I dislike that fact. For the purposes of this channel, I'm only going by what the school actually claims. I will do a series covering unclaimed titles later on. I have added a layer to my tiers and now broken them down into 5 sections. 100% legit, debatable but fair, I see your argument but no, complete bullshit, and introducing 1941 Alabama, which will be reserved for the most imaginary or dumb claims that exist. The Harvard Crimson are up as our last Ivy team before the heavy hitters of Yale and Princeton, and they all occurred before the Ivy League actually existed. A lot of you would have probably thought they claimed more than 7, just like the Bulldogs and Tigers, myself included, if only because of the team's age itself and having very loose guidelines for champions in those early years. In fact, most weren't even claimed until decades later. But as is, they claim 7 and leave another 5 unclaimed, but we will possibly explore those in another series if any need spotlighting. Just like Penn, all of these claims are over 100 years old. I apologize in advance if I cannot find many video clips, or if I happen to use some that are not exactly of the year I am speaking of at the time. And for those reasons, maybe this won't be the most entertaining to some, but to my loyal people, we have made it this far with only 9 schools remaining and 45 schools covered. We are getting close, so let's do this thing. Our first claim for Harvard is 1890, and as I've said it several times in this series, we did not have any polls yet until the 1930s, so judging these claims won't include any rankings. It will just be up to facts we know or opinions we've heard about opponent strength as told through history. This is only the 21st season of college football and is the first ever for new programs such as Ohio State, Colorado, Illinois, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and Vanderbilt. And before we begin any of these, I will remind people that we are in the very, very early territory here. If a team plays a high school or YMCA, or anything less than a college, I'm not going to automatically discount that. Those types of institutions were also new to the game, and in some cases just as talented. It just depended on how organized, well-trained, and the strategies used by them. It was also sometimes difficult to find teams to play in your area and expensive to leave it. So, you beat a high school in this era. I'm cautious but good with it unless it is the only deciding factor in a debate between 3 or more teams. 1890 Harvard blew through their schedule, outscoring all opponents by a combined 555 to 12 to go 11-0. This included 9 shutouts. They were retroactively named national champions by most selectors, and while a few teams went undefeated and even shut out a lot of opponents, none were on this level. The biggest threats were Princeton at 11-1-1, whom the Crimson did not play, and Yale at 13-1, who Harvard beat 12-6 in the season finale. Nobody else even tries to claim this title, so this one is easy enough at 100%. In 1898, we find our next claim. Harvard again went undefeated at 11-0, but were not quite as dominant as 1890. They scored nearly 300 less points, but still put up 7 shutouts. And this time, the nation as a whole was closer to them, as around 18 teams went without a loss in 1898, and around 14 of those were untied as well. But obviously, not all of those teams were created equal. For example, Harvard would have likely demolished 7-0 Kentucky State. Some teams looked good on paper with perfect records, but the talent gap and perceived strength of schedule was enormous. Almost everyone named Harvard champions retroactively. Everyone except Park H. Davis, who went with Princeton. And if you are new to this channel, I, and many others who have done this sort of thing, have many problems with him. I don't want to regurgitate the same jokes, so just, well, fuck that guy. The good explanation I give in the other videos is this. Davis is not always a complete idiot. He annoys me more because of his indecisiveness and tendency to favor his favorite teams, such as ones he coached at or lived near, and would often throw a team in there that no other selector did just to be difficult. He picked co-champions 28 times in the 64 years he made picks, and these sometimes included 3 teams. If you want to hear any of those jokes, go back and watch any video with early claims in it. The recent Penn video is a good one. Anyways, back to the situation of 1898. Princeton has not been covered yet in this series, but has no realistic claim here, Davis. That team tied Army 5-5. The Crimson beat Army on the road 28-0. I know that's not perfect proof that Harvard is better, but it's the best we have, and that margin of victory is a pretty good indicator. And if nothing else, a win beats a tie, Park H. douchebag. Crimson are 100% champions again. The next season, Harvard would claim title number 3. The 1899 season saw the team start out 10-0 with 9 shutouts. The final game against Yale was also a shutout, but on both sides, as we had a 0-0 tie. Despite the blemish, 3 selectors named the Crimson national champion retroactively, those being the Helms Foundation, Holgate System, and the National Championship Foundation. Princeton also claims 1899, being named by the Billingsley Report, and of course, Davis. The Tigers lost to Cornell 0-5 to boast a 12-1 record, and maybe most impressively for them, played the whole season without a head coach. Now, Yale, who Harvard tied, were beaten by Princeton, which leads me to believe the margin between the Tigers and Crimson is actually paper thin this season. I think the real debate is where to put Princeton this season, but we will do that during their video. As for Harvard, they have more selectors naming them champions, and having a tie on the schedule is better than a loss. I think the only debate here is that 1-point common game with Yale. I think the battle of the true champion could have gone either way depending on weather, home field, etc. if there had been a real game. But that is all speculation. What we actually have in front of us is a tied team versus a one-loss team, both claiming the same title. For that reason alone, I am keeping Harvard at 100% despite the debate that can be made. I don't find the debate strong enough to bump them down a tier, but I could understand if you do. Welcome to the new century, everyone. 1910 is our next claim to examine and comes under College Football Hall of Famer Percy Hofton in his 3rd season. And this one is gonna sound a little familiar. A 9-0 run to the finish for Harvard where they tie Yale 0-0. This team did not dominate, but did sneak by everyone without a loss. The Crimson were named national champions by nearly everyone and can be pretty much considered consensus. There are a couple of teams that could make a claim but don't, and maybe we will look at those in the future series. There is also one team that should not make a claim and do, that being Auburn. Auburn now claims 1910 as part of the Great Exaggeration of 2025. That team lost 9-0 to Texas, who lost 2 games themselves. In the Auburn video that kicked off this entire series, I call that claim complete and utter bullshit. Longhorn bullshit, if you will, because that's where this claim lives, underneath the boot of 1910 Texas. The War Chickens did have one selector on their side and one mathematical formula, so I do not give them the 41 Bama tier, but it's still no good. Harvard stands alone here, and maybe they shouldn't, but hey, those couple of other teams could always go back and claim it if they want to make this more interesting someday. 100% as of now, though. 1911 saw the team go 6-2-1, which leads us to our next claim of 1912. A perfect 9-0 season and an impressive showing in almost every game. The team was named national champion by pretty much every selector, so I really don't know what else to say to make this entry longer. It's undisputed, and while one other team was named sole champion by Billingsley, that team does not claim it. Another is named co-champion by one selector and also, understandably, does not claim it. Harvard is again 100%. I did not think these claims would be so easy up to this point. The very next year, in 1913, Harvard claims number 6. The team won a perfect 9-0 and would actually be the last championship team for Coach Percy. Harvard got the championship nod from a handful of selectors, but Chicago and Auburn also claimed this one. In my video featuring Chicago, I called the claim fair. In my Auburn video, I also called the claim fair. I would hate to call all 3 teams in one season the same thing, so let's see if I can convince myself in one direction or another. Chicago, at 7-0, debatably had the toughest schedule out of these 3. Princeton and Yale both had down seasons, and Harvard's argument for being number 1 really rests on what they did in 1912. Is domination in the previous year a valid argument? No, of course not. Only for preseason rankings is that ever important. Auburn beat up on the South, but the South was not yet a power in the sport. I found it plenty credible enough, though, for Auburn, or at least credible enough not to discredit the title claim. Then again, this whole tougher schedule talk is all speculative, and Harvard did everything they had to and won over a majority of selectors. Given all the info, or lack thereof, to go on, I have no choice but to call the Crimson 100% again. Because the only debate here is that maybe the powerhouses they played the year before weren't quite as good. That's a lot of guesswork, and Harvard has to be my top dogs due to the lack of incriminating evidence otherwise. Man, oh man, is 1919 a mess of claims, and Harvard's 7th and final is included in that. The team mostly decimated the first 6 opponents before getting tangled up in a 10-10 tie at Princeton. From there, the team won out and even capped the season in the 6th ever Rose Bowl, beating Oregon 7-6. At 9-0-1, the team was named champions by the Helms Foundation and the Holgate System, and co-champions by several more. The other teams claiming 1919 are Center, Illinois, and Texas A&M. Luckily, I have covered all of these teams in this series, so here's where I stand. Center and Texas A&M, I said fair. For Illinois, I said I saw the argument, but no. Please watch those videos if you haven't, but to summarize quickly, Center was a small school that delivered big beatdowns in a weak schedule. They are also now in Division III, so even though they only had one selector, let's just give them a break as they don't seem close to even winning a title at their current level ever again. The Aggies were similar. They went perfect through a schedule you'd consider a bit weaker at that time, and not bad today. They also had one select. It's a weak claim, but I did give them the benefit. Illinois lost a game to an average Wisconsin team, so I did not think they belonged in the conversation. There are also a few teams that could make a claim that do not. This is considered a weak schedule for Harvard, playing smaller schools and a YMCA, which I feel at this point in history they should not have been. There were enough opponents out there, and the team themselves were well established at this point in history. Also, the Princeton team they tied were not monsters themselves. As I said in one of the other 1919 conclusions, this one is just too hard to actually figure out. Even Illinois with the loss had an argument due to strength of schedule, and maybe Center and Texas A&M deserved less credit than I gave them. So here it is. I can't call the Crimson world beaters. I also can't say Center or A&M would have had a close game with them. I have to stick Harvard at debatable but fair. There's a clear debate, but at the end of said debate, can I really say without a doubt that they were a no in any way, especially with multiple selectors? I cannot. Well, there it is. 7 legit titles. And sure, can any title that is from 107 plus years ago actually be legit? No, of course not. It was hardly even the same game. Some took it more seriously, and most teams didn't even know they would be called a champion until 25 to 75 years later. Take all these with a grain of salt, as I'm sure you have. But they are legit in my eyes within the parameters that were in place at that time. Lately in this series, I've been ending with my thoughts on if I think the team in question will be adding to the trophy case anytime soon, like within the next 5 to 10 years. And I'll just repeat mostly what I said for Penn and others. As with every school in that conference, the answer is going to be a resounding hell no. The Ivy League just started participating in the FCS playoffs in 2025 and do not even offer scholarships for football. And wouldn't you know it, I did an entire video on that subject. Please go check that out if you haven't already. But if a Cinderella team comes out of the Ivy League and makes a run in the playoffs, it certainly could be Harvard. They did, just in 2025, qualify for the FCS playoffs in the first season of eligibility, even after losing to Yale in the final game of the regular season. Prior to that game, they were ranked number 8 in the nation. They went on to lose in the first round to number 9 Villanova 52-7. That team lost by 3 scores in the semifinals. That is how big the talent gap is between an Ivy League team and an actual FCS contender. On the other hand, Yale had better luck in those same playoffs. But we'll get to that later. No, I do not see Harvard navigating the FCS playoffs and winning a national title in the next 5 to 10 years. But if anyone in the Ivy League could, in the next 50 years, the Crimson would be on my short list. And there we go. If you feel I was unfair or missed a piece of info, go ahead and make your case in the comments. Please go check out the other videos in this series. There is a playlist for them, and we are in the final stretch. And remember, this is just one guy on YouTube who did some research and gave an opinion. I'm sure I won't change any fanbase's opinion on the titles they choose to boast about, and certain fanbases have made that pretty clear thus far. This has been College Football Chronicles, and I hope you join me next time.